Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Ken Kraft.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ross, for sharing those stories about how we owned it and how those markets owned it in 2019. As we kick off the afternoon, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about unleashing the power of Salesforce. You've already heard how important it's going to be to our future, and it will be the tool in which we do our jobs every day, both from a marketing and a sales and an operations perspective, ultimately. What we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of an external perspective, and then we're also going to have an internal perspective in that we're going to hear from some of the leaders that are in the tool today and share a little bit about their experience so far. So let's start with the external perspective. Tiffany Bova is the global customer growth and innovation evangelist at Salesforce. In this role, Tiffany helps companies reimagine not only how they can grow bigger, but can grow better with innovative models and technology. Prior to working at Salesforce, Tiffany was a distinguished analyst and research fellow at Gartner, where she won the Thought Leadership Award and earned accolades from the best leaders in technology for her cutting-edge analysis and her skills at inventing bold strategies for growth. Tiffany is a passionate and brilliant advocate committed to her clients' success and prosperity. Please join me in welcoming Tiffany Bova, Global Customer Growth and Innovation Evangelist with Salesforce.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing after lunch? Those were some fantastic stories. Really great to hear that my alma mater, Arizona State, is going to be powered by Cox. Go Sun Devils. Any Wildcats in the room? Who cares? Anywho. I couldn't think of a better place to be here today. This is my first big stage of the year. If some of you notice, I have a couple bandages on my neck. I just had 2 discs replaced in my neck 3.5 weeks ago. So I'm a little foggy, but I'm ready to own it. So we will have this presentation. So this is going to be a tale of growth, talking about how a few things. 1, work is changing. 2, the competitive landscape is changing. 3, our employees are getting overwhelmed. But the most disruptive thing, I think, is the fact that our customers are now far more engaged and also more demanding of us as brands. And it pushes us every single day to do better. When you think about the landscape overall, I want to start by saying I have to set the scene. I have to set the scene on what's going on from a market perspective to make sure that you understand why it is that you're making these massive investments in technology and really, quite frankly, in some ways making us all very uncomfortable. Sort of the new normal is we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And one really fantastic quote that a CEO I admire who is the chairman and CEO of IBM, Ginny Rometty, has said that growth and comfort never coexist. This is part of a longer quote that she made a number of years ago. It's probably two and a quarter years ago. And at the time that she made this quote, they had experienced 21 or 22 quarters at the time of no growth. None. The largest technology company in the world that continuously over the last decade files more patents than anybody else, has invented and created entire categories that many have followed. And you hear a brand like IBM say, growth is getting harder. And it's not because one day it just gets harder. There's signals along the way that are telling you that there are things changing in the marketplace. And I think in your particular category, you understand this better than many. That the fourth industrial revolution is on top of us at the moment. If you're paying attention to the news right now, Davos is going on, the World Economic Forum, talking about the impact that this fourth industrial revolution has to the way we live, we work, how we engage with each other, how we take care of the planet, how we are going to give back. But the most important part of that for this conversation is the fact that we are far more connected today than we've ever been before. I always fast forward to this circle and go right to the car and I say, I know there's a day coming very soon where the scale in my bathroom will talk to my Fitbit, lock my refrigerator. My car will show up in the driveway and take me to the gym. Now, all of that is pretty possible today. So we know that we're on the cusp of completely engaging with our homes, our communities, our friends, our family, our work, our doctors, our teachers, our lawyers, our dentists. We're going to engage with everybody differently, and we're pushing the envelope to see where technology can actually fill in these gaps, especially when it comes to the business environment of solving jobs to be done. What jobs need to be done that Cox can solve? How do we decouple these very complicated and large pain points in business or in cities or in hospitals or in buildings or in hotels? How do we pull that job out and make it a much better experience? We're working on one right now with Marriott, since we're in a Bonvoy property, where we're going to be putting Alexas into the hotel rooms to actually manage your entire engagement with that particular brand. I'd like a wake-up call, open the blinds, turn on the TV. I'd like to order breakfast. I'd like to order a taxi in the morning. Can you check my flight? All of that connection is now happening in an expectation that when you can't smartly control your environment, you wonder what's going on. That's this hyper-connected fourth industrial revolution that we're involved in right now. Now there's rumor, whispers, we might be on the edge of the fifth, which is this hyper-personalized engagement and experience that happens between humans and technology, and somehow along the way, there's a human in there as well. So the big question for me is, how can we as businesses navigate these new standards of engagement? How do we now change the way we market, we sell, we position our brand, we organize, we communicate, we enable our employees? How do we change that? We went out to the market and we did a double-blind survey. One, they did not know it was Salesforce. Two, they did not know it was a technology company. And we asked both consumers and business owners, right, so in small, medium, and enterprise, why do they choose brands today? What is the compelling reason that makes them say, yes, I am going to believe that wonderful, what did he call the RFP? Creative writing. I love that I have to borrow it. The RFP, why am I going to believe it? Why am I going to choose that brand? Why am I going to say, this is the one that I'm going to go with? 4 pillars emerged. Now, of course, within there's a lot underneath each, but I'm going to give you the high level of what we found. The first one is experience. I could stand up here for 2 hours and talk about experience. I've been talking about it now for 7 or 8 years. I was part of the team at Gartner that made the prediction that the chief marketing officer was going to spend more than the chief information officer, which then sent off a flurry of acquisitions by Salesforce and many others to go and capture that budget that now the CMO was going to start buying technology, and not SaaS-based, not digital advertising, not keywords or search engine optimization, but literally standing up development teams, reference architects, and making all these investments around owning the experience that the brand had at a digital layer equal to what it did in an analog layer. We're now facing this tipping point where, from a brand perspective, customers, and when I say customers, right, can be C, can be B, are telling us that now experience is almost as equal, as important as the products that you sell. Last year, 84% say that they would think about experience almost equal to that of the product that you're selling. This year, it's 88%. We actually think that by 2023, those two things, the products and services that you sell, experience will be equal to why someone makes a decision to buy your brand. And so I'm going to give just a quick example of the easiest and fastest way for me to compress what this really means. So I can kind of see many of you, but how many of you have caught Uber in the last 2 weeks? Okay, so leave your hands up for a second. Or how many of you have caught it in the last 30 days? Okay, all right. Now, if you leave your hands up for a second, I'm going to ask a second question. How many of you remember what you paid? Okay, so I'm going to ask again. I want you to look around. How many of you caught Uber in the last 30 days? How many of you remember what you paid? How many of you remember if the car was smelly, if the driver was nice, if the music was too loud, if he wouldn't listen to where you wanted him to go? But how much did you pay? The job to be done is taking you from point A to point B. I don't want to build a car. I don't want to create a manufacturing plant. I don't want to become Tesla. I just want to pick one job out of there. When you don't have a car, I'm going to solve that, and I'm going to make it as easy as buying a book online. I want to stream music as easy as buying a book online. I want to make booking a house or a room in a house, not a hotel, as easy as booking or buying a book online. I want to find office space I can use in a city that I don't have an office, as easy as buying a book online. That has generated massive businesses by focusing strictly on the experience of make it really easy, make it frictionless, and focus in on that experience. Now, industries are absorbing that and achieving that at very different levels. So I've sort of highlighted where media and communications is. On the left, it says bottom ranking industries for experience. On the right is top ranking industries for experience. So you have some industries that have pivoted very heavily over to saying, I understand experience is going to be, or already is in some categories, as important as the product or service that I am buying. So that is the first one, experience. And like I said, I could spend hours talking about this, but that's the first one. The second one is innovation. And I'm going to put this on its head a little bit because the obvious innovation, I don't need to tell this room about innovation, but what I want to tell you on the other side is that because in our consumer lives, we have this very clear understanding of the capabilities of technology today, that when a brand fails me, when it comes to technology or innovating with technology, my assumption, my hypothesis is, and the research proved it out, is that we feel that brand has apathy towards us as a customer or as a prospect or as a business. So when you know you can order a car, see it on a map, see how far it is, choose which credit card you want, you and a colleague decide to get in the back of an Uber, you're driving to the airport, you're in two different cost centers, and you both work for Cox. How quickly and how easy is it for you to be able to split that fare to your cost centers? It takes about 2 seconds. Let's play that out. Let's say that you were in the back of a cab and you were handed a receipt and you had to split that across 2 cost centers. How many of you would do that? Because it's not 3 seconds. It's like, it's not even worth the $18. Forget it, I'll pay for it. So our expectation is that I know I can do it in another industry. Why can't I do it in this industry? And so customers are saying, I expect new products and services more frequently than I have in the past because I know that it can be done because I see it being done in other places in my life, whether it's business or consumer. Now, you may say, well, the examples you've all given, Tiffany, are all consumer, and we sell to business, or we sell to higher ed, or hospitals, or hospitality, right? You're going industry, you're possibly not selling to me individually. But remember who's sitting on the other side of the table when you're in there battling it out for big deals. 4, 5, 6, 10 consumers, all with their varying degree of expectations from an innovation and technology and experience level. So in the statistics, what's interesting is the B2B expectations is higher than that of consumer. So when I first started talking about this research, I would always get feedback that you always give consumer examples, we're a B2B company, and I actually say that I don't like the separation of B2B and B2C anymore. I never really did, but I really don't now. I feel like it's B2E, which is everything, everyone, every experience, because we take every experience we have, doesn't matter what industry, doesn't matter what hat we're wearing, and we carry it to the next one in a completely different industry. So when we talk about innovation, if your customers know that other brands like you are innovating and you're not doing it, what does it tell them? If someone in a totally different industry is doing something innovative and your customers come to you and you're not doing it, what is it telling you? That's what I felt was really key in this sort of pillar of innovation. The third one is trust. Once again, this week with Davos and World Economic Forum, it is definitely a topic we have been saying, and the market has been saying, and Edelman just came out with their new trust barometer again this week. Trust is the bedrock for customers' relationships. Do they trust that you are going to, not only from a data and security standpoint, but are you going to make those investments and do what's best for them and not just only focus on what's best for your bottom line? That you may want to make different decisions, walk away from certain deals to ensure the fact that the success of your customer is always first and foremost. They trust that that's going to happen. Generationally, we definitely see that customers, individuals, are more willing to give information if they believe that they are going to get a better experience by providing it. So I have no problem giving more information if the brand is actually going to personalize and change the way they speak to me, engage with me, communicate with me, support me. But if I give them all this data and they treat me the same way, or I give them all this data and all of a sudden I'm solicited by 10 other companies, that doesn't make me feel like I can trust them. And trust is becoming more important, but more elusive. And so it isn't just about data, as I was saying. It's authenticity, it's confidence, it's ethics, it's transparency, it's honesty, it's security, it's reliability, and it's privacy. It's across multiple categories, with trust being one big umbrella on top of it. Now, if you have a message as a brand around trust, do you share it? Do people know it? Do they understand it? Do your customers understand it? Can your employees say it? What is your position on trust? What is the standard Cox response if someone says, "Can I trust you with my information?" What's the answer? That comes down to the fourth pillar. The fourth pillar is values. Values are, what does your brand stand for? Are you giving back to your community? What are the things that you're doing from an equality standpoint? What are your values as a brand, as a leadership team, as an individual? Do you live them every day? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, values are now increasingly impacting the bottom line. Because companies and consumers are making buying decisions based on a company's corporate value more and more. Once again, generationally changing. But there are certain brands where I think I know what their values are. Doesn't mean I'm always accurate. But I think I know what their values are, and I have personally made a decision to not give them my money. I don't agree with their values. I am not going to give them my money. I like this brand. I have a choice between two. They're kind of the same. I like their values better. I'm going to make a buying decision because of that. And the consumers, the customers, those we surveyed said, I refuse to buy from companies with poor ethics. I want to know what the company that I'm working with, what their clear position is on equal rights. And I want to understand what's the equal opportunity around technology advances. This is really a big one, especially in your category. This sort of ubiquitous access to technology, that it isn't about economic status or race or gender or location in the world, that everybody has access. It is definitely one of the conversations and one of the predictions around everybody having a right to internet access by 2026 is just a right. And so in the future, organizations will completely reset value and meaningful engagement with customers across those 4 pillars. And so when you're planning for this year, second half of the year, getting ready for what is your organization going to look like, what investments are you going to make in the tools you use, how you enable and empower your people to think differently and work differently, because competition is increasing, you want to make sure they know the answer to those 4 things, because your customers are going to be asking. Now, if those things are true, where do we begin? Where do we begin? Number 1, we don't have a technology problem. The irony of that statement is not lost on me now that I work at Salesforce. I'm not saying we do everything perfect. What I'm saying is we don't have a technology problem. Technology, ours and others, can pretty much solve whatever issue a company or opportunity a company has. The challenge is that the people and process isn't keeping pace. And so I had done some research in preparation for writing a book that I did last year called Growth IQ, and the very first quote in the book is this, because it was the foundation for everything that I said. Because everyone's looking for the external factors of why growth is getting harder and all these things that we now have to deal with, right? Everything I've just described. But the reason that companies are finding it more difficult to keep and continue growing profitably is internal, not external black swan events. And so we have to, as organizations, move from being product-centric. Here's the product we sell. Here's the speeds and feeds. Here's the bits and bytes. Oh, and by the way, here's how we sell it, which I'll get into in a little bit. And moving towards more customer-centric by implying this intelligence and allowing this feedback loop between data and algorithms and insights and decisions and customer experiences and feeding itself right back in. Now, once you capture all that data, now the job is what do you do with it? Because I often hear data's the new oil. And I was just in Dallas this morning. I was speaking last night in Dallas. And I'm like, you can't just go drive your car up to an oil rig and fill your car up. You have to wait for it to go to a refinery. That's analytics. And then that analytics pushes out intelligence, and that's the gasoline that powers the car. So data for data's sake is interesting. I'm glad it's all in one place. I'm glad it's a single source. I'm glad that we're supporting much of it. But if you don't then analyze it and take that intelligence and make different decisions, this is not the end zone where you are now, because the end zone keeps moving, because the customer expectations keep changing, and technology keeps innovating. But the things that stay true are, how do you organize yourself in a way that supports this very fluid and moving target of customer expectations, employee expectations, and as well company expectations. The first is really thinking about how do you pull teams together. And it's an age-old conversation. I used to run a global sales organization for a Fortune 500 company, and then I picked up marketing, and I thought that I really understood the sort of schizophrenic relationship between sales and marketing until I had to run them both and argue with myself about why we don't get along. But sales, marketing gives crappy leads. Marketing, sales never follows up on the leads. Like that conversation never happens. But the one that gets left out a lot is customer service. And so those 3 teams to me are the trifecta of growth. That the post-sale experience is almost more important than the pre and the actual active selling, because you want them to buy more. Those customers you already have trust you more. they're more loyal to you, they forgive you, they're also willing to spend a little bit more money, and they've already told you that they like your brand. But we always try to fix the sales and marketing conversation. We have to inject service. Now, the easiest way to do that is to create metrics that are shared across those three organizations. Things like Net Promoter Scores or customer satisfaction. Sales is easy, right? It's like, how much did you sell? If your quota's $1 million, did you hit $1 million? Great. I'm oversimplifying. Marketing, how many leads, good or bad? Great. Customer service, how many phone calls did you take? How quickly did you get the customer off the phone? And what percentage did we answer before the third ring? All three of those are fair metrics. But those three metrics, although they're one of the top three metrics of those organizations, do not pull those groups together. Because sales is, I'm going to sell the $1 million. I sold $1 million and I made it to club this year. Bob over here, he sold $750,000 and he didn't make it to club. But 3 months after club, my $1 million is $750,000. Bob's $750,000 is now $1.3 million because he's upsold and cross-sold multiple products. Who should have gone to club? Bob. But I went because the metric is solely oriented around that. So if you layer in things like churn or upsell or cross-sell or portfolio sell or share of wallet, and then you say, well, what about selling out of the customer service organization, which I believe is the next powerful sales force, 2 words. That they're the engine that can actually find you growth in quarter. So you have to find a way to pull those metrics and those groups together. When those things don't happen, this is what happens. You have a very disconnected customer experience. So I'm going to give you an example. It was a telco provider, not you. And I had a hard down with internet access in my house, and so I called. Well, first I started on chat. Chat popped me to phone, got to phone. Call was 90 minutes. I was happy to be on the phone for 90 minutes. I needed it solved, so that wasn't the problem. But every 29 minutes, I had to hang up the phone, and he had to call me back. The first time I was like, oh God, please call me back, because if you don't call me back, I have to tell someone this story all over again. But 29 minutes, I had to hang up, he called me back. 29 minutes later, I had to hang up, he had to call me back. 29 minutes later, I had to hang up, he had to call me back. Why? Because the metric was you can't be on the phone with a customer longer than 30 minutes. That never happens. That's what I mean by when you don't have those teams aligned and you're not watching for the success of, wait a second, the right thing to do would be let Tiffany Bova, whose ARPU is X, who's been a customer for Y, talk on the phone for 90 minutes to fix a hard down that's our fault. So that's what I mean by you have to pull those things together. So the final thoughts. For me, it is all about how do you think differently about growth. The first one is everyone plays a role in customer experience, not just the front line. So not just those customer facing. Sales enablement teams, finance organizations, HR, ops, the person at the front desk, the guys and girls in the trucks. Everybody plays a role. Everybody owns the Net Promoter Score. Everybody owns going after industry awards and moving those numbers up from an experience perspective. The next is be the brand your customers love. You want to be the brand. When I'm traveling around the world, I do 100 keynotes a year somewhere in the world. I meet with customers on a regular basis, and I ask them, what was their last best customer experience? Who do they love as a brand? I want to hear Cox. If you were to say, tell me the 3 brands to your customers that you love the most from a customer experience, unprompted, would they say you? You have to become the brand that they love. Next is trading your intuitions for insights, using all this fantastic data that's coming out of the new systems you've invested in, out of the new platforms, and say, I'm not just going to do it this way I always have done because I've always done it this way, and sort of rest on the laurels of the status quo. I'm going to stretch myself to get uncomfortable and figure out where I can actually extend and improve performance. Probably not for this crowd. I'm guessing you're not afraid of technology, but many are afraid that AI and machine learning and natural language processing is going to replace jobs, especially in sales. And I would argue there was another research firm that put out a prediction that 1 million sellers would be eliminated by last year. I didn't agree with it when it came out 4 years ago. I don't agree with it now. We see many sales organizations actually growing once they deploy AI because they get better. And as they get better and they grow, what do they want to do? Hire more salespeople. The next is your differentiation will be your mental model. So the mental model is really easy. How you do things, who you are as a brand, this own it, the feeling you have cannot be replicated. That is your mental model. And rally around the customer. Always, always, always rally around the customer. But you have to empower each other. You have to own this journey together, go on it together with a single voice and make sure that everybody in the organization understands why you're doing the things you're doing. And it's important for you to always remember that it starts with you. Because at the end of the day, the backbone of corporate growth is personal growth. Your business will not grow if we don't all grow individually. So, what will you do different? What will you do differently based on what you've heard all morning, what you're going to hear this afternoon? What are you going to do differently? What will you change? What will be your small pivot? One thing, two things. If you leave today and you do everything exactly the same as you did when you walked in, this was a waste of your day. We can all make more money. We cannot make more time. So taking that back to your teams, be bold. I should have said own it. I missed it. But own it and be bold. But I want to thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to spend a half an hour with you. Thank you very much for being such a fantastic, trailblazing Salesforce customer. I appreciate your time and attention, and to the team for the invitation. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Fantastic job. Thank you very much.